Hey there, this is your spoiler alert. We're talking the books of the Wheel of Time and how they compare to Season 1, Episodes 1 through 3 of the show on Amazon. If you're not a book reader and you don't want to be spoiled, this particular episode of Bustin' Blockbusters might not be for you. You have been warned.
Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Synctuple B. Yeah, Synctuple B. That's Bustin' Blockbusters Book Biased Babble. 5 Bs. My name is Double M. That's Matt Murdock. And I realize that I am probably not your favorite Double P podcast personality. However, I am your only podcast personality this time around, and I am part of Double P, the Double P Media Network, Double P Podcast Network, doublepmedia.com. So be sure to check out that website. Also be sure to check out the Double P Media YouTube. You can do that by simply going to youtube.com/c/double, the word double, the letter P, media. Yeah, that's how you say all of that. Welcome to the show. Today, as a warning to any of you non-book readers, I'm going to be spoiling stuff from the books, so you don't want to be here if you don't want to be spoiled. You've been warned. That's all I'm going to say about that. For you book readers, welcome. And feel free to make fun of me and leave comments below in the YouTube or to tweet to @BustBlockbuster on Twitter, or send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com, mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. Also on that Twitter is a link to the Discord server every Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central Time. That's 3 if you're in the East, noon if you're in the West, and I don't know, sometime in the evening if you're over in England or somewhere else. But if you join the Discord server, there's a permanent invite link on the pin to the Twitter page. You can come and talk to me and tell me what you thought about the most recent episode, which in this case, the next upcoming episode will be episode 4. And we do those on Saturdays after new eps air. So please join us for that. Also, I'm going to be doing a contest. I promise you, I am going to be giving something away. And we will be entering people based on their subscriptions to the different Double P podcasts. So what you do with that is you send a screenshot of you being subscribed to the YouTube or to any of the podcasts. I do The Dust with Holly that covers his Dark Materials. Bubba and Catfish do Parsec Passion, which covers The Mandalorian and all of the Star Wars franchises. Bubba and Catfish also be doing the Joffrey of podcasts, which will be covering House of Dragon in 2022. Or you can subscribe to Podcast Lilibet, either via my feed or via the Double P Podcasts feed. Find either of those. All you have to do is just take a little screenshot of you being subscribed to any of those podcasts, and then you tweet that screenshot to me @BustBlockbusters, and then you are entered into a contest to win something cool, Wheel of Time related. So do that. Let's not delay any further, though, and let's get into our Triple B, Book Biased Babble. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to merely put these kind of in a category of general first, and then a little bit by character. And we're only covering the first 3 episodes, but I may be spoiling things from books that are well beyond book 1. So just be warned. You need to be a pretty avid book reader, because some of this material I had to even look up. I had to go back and look at some of the other books to figure out what the heck I would be talking about here. I'll start with just the general stuff. The first thing I just want to say is, how are we continuing to resist any of the gender politics thing that's in the beginning of the pilot? I don't understand how there can be so much hate out there in the world, hate for women, that a fandom just imagine if you're Robert Jordan and you're writing this stuff. I mean, what kind of reception did he get? Of course, he wouldn't have gotten blasted by Twitter because the internet wasn't even completely around by the time the first book came out, I don't think. But it's just disgusting. I mean, people, you've got to grow up and understand that the reason these kinds of things are controversial is because they shouldn't be. Get over it, you bunch of little fantasy boys. Stop with the hate for women. Stop slamming a show because it actually addresses both sides of an issue. That's all I'll say about that. Next, for book readers, and please don't take this personally, but just can we pump the brakes on criticizing every little thing, any little omission, and can we just let Rafe tell his story the way that he wants to tell the story, and then judge it on that merit rather than on the merit of somebody who wrote this stuff? I understand you want to be a protector of the source material. Guess what? Amazon has given this guy the license to do whatever the heck he wants, and that's all there is to it. You don't have to agree with everything, but you don't have to just totally slam something. The art in this show is beautiful. I mean, the shots are amazing. The characters are well acted, even if you don't like what's coming out of their mouths. Everything's being acted wonderfully. I think the story has been paced in a way that is very exciting. I didn't need to go to Berlon. I didn't need to see Mordeth. These kinds of things, I think, can be explained in some ways because the show is starting to use a vehicle, as we saw in episode 3. It's starting to use the vehicle of flashbacks. And I think that that will be very handy for filling in some of these things that everybody's saying, well, we didn't get this and we didn't get that. Yeah, you try and condense, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of a story into at best, 7-season television show. So let's just pump the brakes on that. We can look at each of those as it goes. The only time it concerns me about adaptation stuff is not so much how book readers will perceive it, because we know where the stuff comes from, and we can even have fun with the expansion of story. But non-book readers, I don't want them to think that the story isn't well constructed. And that's the only time that I get a little upset if I see anything that I feel like, doesn't work all of that well with the source material, or certain omissions. I can say, well, will that come back to haunt them in such and such a season or further on down the line? Those are the only times that I get a little concerned. I'm not concerned that I didn't get Mordeth at Shadar Logoth. I'm not concerned that we didn't, understand a lot of things about why Tom wasn't at the Beltane. I could care absolutely less that Tom Maryland's patches are on the inside of his cloak as opposed to outside. I mean, some of this stuff is a little ridiculous. It's still being paid homage to. They're still paying homage to it. They're just doing it in a different way, not the way that you pictured it in your head. None of us get what we want in this world. We just work and try to get as close to what we want as we can. And I can tell that Rafe has worked his fingers to the bone for this show, and I applaud him for it. So I hate to sound like a grumpy old man, but that's what I am. And I'm tired of self-entitlement for something that you didn't create. Okay, that's my rant. There are plenty of nods to things in this particular series already, things that maybe we didn't get. I love the fact that, we saw Egwene writing Bella. That's just a nice little thing. She even called Bella by name, I think, in episode 3 when Bella was going all crazy at Shadar Logoth. The images of the Dragon Fang are wonderful. If you know what those are, I mean, with the sheep. Also, I think it was pointed out by a YouTuber. Well, who was the YouTuber? What up? That the pool of blood that Nynaeve came up through in the pool, the blood had kind of the shape of a dragon fang as well. So I thought that was a wonderful little nod. I think there's plenty of Easter eggs. I'm not good at pointing those out because I'm not a book expert. I'm just someone who has enjoyed the story over the years and someone who is now having to reacquaint myself with the books because it's been so long since I read any of them. So I'm not going to be your expert. I'm just going to be your fan. And I'm going to try to respect both the show and the books as we go along. Also, I mean, people got upset, and this was more from a non-book reader thing, but people got upset about Tam's matches. And I'm thinking of strikers. I mean, we do find out about them much later, but again, Tam is a traveled guy. He may have gotten strikers, who knows when he was, fighting the Aiels. And so it doesn't feel like that these are the kinds of nitpicky things that people ought to be getting upset with. I'm the guy who does Matt's tomatoes. I'm the guy who got upset that all of a sudden they were growing tomatoes on Lost Island. That's my corner. Let me do that stuff. You guys just watch the show and tell me what I'm getting wrong about what's in the show. So those are some nice things. There was a mention of Baerlon in episode 3. They said that that's where they were from. And no, we're not going to get chapter 13 from Eye of the World. But at least it wasn't specifically forgotten about, right? And the whole representation of Moraine and those and her gang before Shadar Logoth coming across the White Cloaks, that was kind of a tribute to what happened in Baerlon. So I don't see any problem with that. What else? The characters being aged up. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Age them up a couple years. For one thing, it allows a lot more emotional stakes as far as Rand and Egwene are concerned. You see that their relationship is a little bit deeper, maybe even physically, than it was portrayed in the books because they were a little younger in the books. And so I feel that helps make the stakes of Egwene deciding to become a wisdom, or as we know, she's going to be encouraged to become an Aes Sedai, and even eventually will become the Amyrlin seat. I've got more on that in a little bit also. But I think that this way, because the characters are aged up a little more, we get more of an emotional investment. We get higher emotional stakes for the two of them. Plus, it allows for, a little more adult language or framing and a little more content. I mean, I know that a lot of what happens in the books is just people saying, oh, lights help me or whatever, instead of using things, just completely foul language. But, we didn't have to have Rand staring blankly at Dana at the bar when she inferred that his sexual orientation might not be what she typically saw in a guy around there. Aging these characters up, we don't have to worry about the fact that some kid's hearing about something that they've never heard of or don't understand. Now, there are lots of little trivial things, and one of the things that I want to get to is Padan Fain. The whistling that he did when he was coming into town. If you notice, there is whistling in that second episode as well at Shadar Logoth. It's kind of what wakes Matt up. And, there's nothing to say, because that whistling was exactly the same, there's nothing to say that Padan Fain wasn't there. We just didn't see it. And because they've introduced the vehicle of flashbacks, we may even get a Padan Fain flashback at some point, so that we can explain that he was there at Shadar Logoth. It may even explain the whole Mordith thing. I mean, that would be great, to have the merger just in a flashback. There is the danger always of when you decide to use flashback things, especially with non-book readers, that it will be perceived as retconning rather than, as good story planning. But we as book readers at least will know that it was part of good story planning if we just think about the way that Rand is laying this stuff out for non-book readers. And speaking of that, with a great big emphasis on who is the Dragon Reborn, and even making sure that the gender politics play in there, because Moiraine isn't thinking that it's just one of the guys. She's thinking that it could be Egwene as well. She's thinking initially that it could have been Nynaeve until she eliminates her by age. And so I love that she's not thinking about it in terms of just a guy either. It could be a guy or a girl. And, if reincarnation works that way, then reincarnation works that way. Love it. So that's another thing. But because they are trying to do that, they have to put certain things off as well. And we'll talk about those in terms of characters. I'm sure your guys are thinking of Tam's fever dream. I'll address that in just a little bit. But I'm not worried about the Morda thing. I don't know why everybody else is. I don't get that. I don't see that as any reason to hurt the show in any way. When, if we're going to use the flashback vehicle, you can easily have Morda, kind of jump on with Pat and Fane in a flashback. So I don't really have any problem with that at all. There was another thing at the very beginning of the first episode that What Up, that's WOT Up on YouTube, pointed out. There was a symbol in a wristband that Leandrin had on, and it looked very similar to a symbol that the gentleman that she ended up gentling, it looked very similar to a symbol that he had on his, and he wondered if they knew each other or not, which is an excellent point, or that it might be something that signifies the area that they're from. I was just wondering if maybe it wasn't just some kind of trophy that this guy was wearing. I hate to think that it would be as excruciatingly, painful for us as viewers to think that he had taken that off somebody he had killed, the same way that the questioner is collecting rings. But who knows? Or maybe it was just like What Up said, maybe it was just the idea that these two are from a common place, or that they have things in common as to why they would be wearing those symbols. The problem is, as I mentioned at the top of this podcast, I don't know what those symbols are. I didn't recognize that symbol. I'm not an expert book reader. But if you are, please tweet to me at BustBlockbuster, or leave comments in the YouTube channel below and just tell me what that symbol is and why those two might be connected, or why even that they might not be connected. Maybe they're not the same symbol. I couldn't get close enough on the gentleman's symbol to really tell if it was exactly the same, but it did look like it had kind of a wristband above and below it, and like the whole thing was just kind of attached to his shirt or cloth or cloak or whatever. So let me know what you think about that. One thing that I think a lot of non-book readers are making the mistake of, and I even did when I read the first book, I was darn sure that Rand was facing off with the Dark One at the end, at the Eye of the World. And I guess it was actually Ishmael. So it's one of those things where even Jordan kind of pulled the rug out from under us in many ways. But I love that Ishmael now has been mentioned by name by Dana, and we know him as the one who brought the prior dragon to the Dark One. But clearly, with the way that this character who's showing up in Rand and Perrin's dreams, clearly with the fiery coal mouth and the ember eyes, the fiery eyes, this guy has to be Ishmael. I love that. Wonderful that they're going to do that same kind of trip on us. Another bit of general stuff, Breen Spring. Now, this is kind of an amalgamation, I believe, of all of the little stops that Rand and Matt made on their way to Camelin and such. I feel like that, they could just put it all in one place and kind of combine little bits of stories from each of them in episode 3. And that was really cool that they included the four kings on the outside of that tavern that they ended up going in and meeting Dana and Tom Maryland in. I thought that was really cool because that was the first place that Rand really kind of channeled his power, was at that four kings, and the channeling was a lot more powerful. I mean, he blew a whole wall out, right? I think he blew a whole wall out in the book, whereas here he just knocked a door down. But it's a powerful door, and even our non-book reader Bubba commented that he thought that this was Rand using his power, and I think he was dead on. So I love that. Getting into some of the characters more specifically, I was really intrigued. There was so much hate for the direction that they took Perrin's story at the beginning. I didn't mind the marriage thing at all. I do realize that there was some weirdish stuff going on in terms of the way that Perrin was looking at Egwene, and it seemed like Egwene was with Rand at the time, and those things were kind of weird. And the fact that Lena didn't go to the ceremony for Egwene tends to make me think that there was some kind of bad blood going on there. And I hope that wasn't a mistake that the showrunner made that can never really pay off, so to speak. But even in the first book, when Perrin and Egwene are with the Tinkers, or with the Tuatha, I can't ever say that name, but even when they're with him, there's kind of a weird little bit of tension going on there, because he gets a little standoffish about Aram, because Egwene and Aram have this kind of thing for a minute. And Rand gets a little standoffish about that. And it's never really clear to me if or not Rand, but Perrin gets a little standoffish about that. And it's never clear to me whether he's just trying to defend Rand's investment in Egwene, or if he has some kind of a little bit of an investment himself. And so that never really bothered me that they had that little bit in either part. It's just that I just hope that they make it pay off somewhere. Now, the wolf stuff I thought has been great. We're going to get Perrin as a wolf brother, a full-blooded, golden-eyed wolf brother. But you don't need Elias for that. You really don't. I think the show's doing a really good job, even though, you can say, well, he kind of makes Perrin kind of guides Perrin a little bit. But he really doesn't. It's more so the wolves in his head that guide him more so than even Elias. He just understands that because Elias is someone who is a wolf brother, that he might be also. And of course, Elias may play different roles as the series goes on, but we're going to have to wait and see when they show him up, because delaying Tom certainly didn't hurt anything at all. I thought that made the episode 3 move better, using that time period to introduce Tom. And now he's with Rand and Matt. And the same way I feel like with Elias, I feel like we need time for Perrin to focus or figure out what the heck's going on with him kind of on his own, because given the story that they gave him at the beginning, the whole thing with his wife and everything, he needs something to focus on to get him out of the dumps about that. And I feel like that maybe we can look at the fact that the wolves were coming down out of the mountain, that Rand and Tam was hearing them, and something was driving them down the mountain. I believe it was Tam who said that. Why couldn't it be the fact that they were merely coming to warn Perrin? And Perrin wouldn't have understood that, but they may have been coming to warn him there. Or the fact that once they're tracing the tracks in episode 2, there's a point where Perrin tells Egwene to stay back. And I felt like that was his wolf sense kind of kicking in, sensing the danger or the potential danger of something ahead. Even though it turns out that the Tinkers are pretty decent people, right? But that's one of the things that I thought is okay. A lot of people complained actually about the twot and the fact that they didn't have bright colors in their clothing. If you look at a shot of the wagons themselves, they're all painted very bright. And so I think it's just a difference of interpretation. And their clothes are a little louder than most people's clothes in this world. Anyway, checks and swaths of different kinds of colors, not bright colors like are described in the book, but I don't have a problem with that. That's just somebody looking for a reason to hate. So those are the things that kind of revolve around Perrin's storyline. I'll get to Egwene in a second, but I do want to turn to Rand here. And lots of people are like, no Tam fever dream? What's going on here? I'm pretty sure the Aiel battle is what we saw in the trailer. And so I'm not worried about that. I feel like that they could do, again, with the flashback vehicle, they can do the Aiel battle and Tam's fever dream at any time, except it doesn't have to be a fever dream. In fact, if you just have even Moraine telling the story of the prophecy itself, then you can just see that Tam is one of the soldiers in the battle. You can see Tam take the baby. And we may not get that until the very end of the season, because I think they really do want to play up this who is the Dragon Reborn mystery all the way up till the end of the season. So I don't think that we need that fever dream until then, as long as they're wanting to play it that way. Is it smart to play it that way? Well, it's going to frustrate book readers a little bit because we're in Rand's head a lot in that first book. And so we start to see the pieces being put together as to who he is truthfully, long before we get to any kind of reveal of who he is to the outside world, right? The outside world doesn't know, but he kind of starts to know a little bit before then, quite a bit before them. So if they're just really trying to make this a mystery about who is the Dragon Reborn, then I can understand the logic of dropping the fever dream. My problem is will there have to be too much misdirection in order, for instance, okay, Rand didn't blow the wall out. So if he didn't, they just had him knock a door down. That's a lot more subtle than the first time Rand channels. And so they're having to pull back some of the events for Rand in order to demonstrate the fact that we don't know who the Dragon Reborn is yet. That's I'm not sure if I would have taken that exact same approach if I was a showrunner, but I'm more than willing to see how it pays off, especially for non-book readers. I know that Bubba right now is heavily rooting for Egwene to be the Dragon Reborn. And so he, as a non-book reader, because he's seen Egwene use the one power a little bit with Moraine, you got to love the fact that they're doing a good job of making it possible for anybody to be. Now, Matt, who is his current traveling buddy with Tom, I do feel like there's a couple things that could have been done better, and I think they're going to be paid off in the 4th episode. So it won't be too long of a slight error, in my opinion. But one of the things that Bubba said when we were talking about episodes 2 and 3, it just seems like just out of the blue, Matt seems like a different person. And he wasn't able to put together that he became like a different person right after he touched that dagger. In a section of the non-book reader podcast, I actually urged him to go back and watch everything in episode 2 again and then look at episode 3. But I didn't want to lead the horse to water for too much, or I guess I led the horse to water, but I didn't want to make him drink, to overuse an exhausted metaphor. And so I feel like that the showrunner could have done a better job of making sure that scene of him taking the dagger did more than just excite the shadows, because that wasn't really the intent of him taking that dagger. I do have after looking at some shots on Twitter, that the Wheel of Time official Twitter, they do a little kind of a bumper teaser for episode 4 on their Twitter account. And there was a shot of Matt, and it looked like some of the taint was on his face and going back into his mouth, or maybe even reverse of that. Maybe it was coming out of his mouth and going onto his face. But I think that we're going to see the taintedness of that dagger and the effect that it's having on Matt in this very next episode. So I'm not too worried about the fact that, Babble will come back after episode 4 and say, oh, so that's why Matt was being a jerk to Rand. And hopefully it'll all register for him in that way. And hopefully it will register for non-book readers. But we'll have to see how that plays out when episode 4 drops. And again, Nynaeve, the whole flashback thing with the Trolloc, a wonderful expansion, because even in the books, it's just like all of a sudden Nynaeve is there. And not a whole lot about that is explained. And Lan's sitting here asking, why, how were you able to track us so well? And because he asked that question, a non-book reader might be thinking, well, okay, she's got a Trolloc blade and she's not answering him how she tracked him. Maybe she's working for the Trollocs, even if it's just for a minute that they're thinking that. So that's some kind of nice little experimental exercise for non-book readers to go through. And I appreciated the fact that they tried that. Maybe my mind's being overactive with imagination in terms of connecting the Trolloc weapon with the fact that she was able to track Lan. But either way, we know how the case is in the books. We know she's going to fall in love with him. So that's not necessarily the answer to, Trollocs aren't the answer as to why she was able to track him so quickly. But I love the fact that they brought it up, because it is one of those things in the books where you just kind of go, whoa, she's here. She wasn't here just a little bit ago. And so I love that they dressed it up. I think that's a true book tribute, actually. So I love that. And because we get flashbacks like that, I think that that's going to be very important as a storytelling vehicle for a lot of this season. And speaking of which, I think that it regards Egwene's braid ceremony as well. We saw in a teaser trailer that wonderful shot of Egwene rising up out of a sacred pool that we can clearly now identify as the one that Nynaeve was cleaning, and probably cleaning that dye from, as well as the one that she was attacked in, or killed the Trolloc in. So I believe that it means we have to get that shot, even though some people are saying, well, it's just been cut out. No, I think it will be done as a flashback. And one of the most beautiful things about that shot is the fact that she's got all those colors all over her. It's a great kind of visual foreshadowing of her becoming the Amyrlin Seat, right? So I think that it will definitely prove important at some point during this series, and we will see that shot of her emerging from that pool with those colors all over, whether it's Nynaeve remembering it, whether it's Egwene remembering it, whether it's somebody reading her. We obviously didn't get men in Baerlon, so we'll have to see what all of that means. But I haven't given up on that, and I loved that whole thing. I thought that was another great expansion into world building for the world that Egwene and Rand and Matt and Perrin are from, the whole Two Rivers area. I love that. I don't really have that much to say about Lan. If you want to talk about the whole bath thing, of course, we know that Lan and Moraine, it's almost like family familiar, so sharing a bath wouldn't be that big of a deal. I made a big deal out of it, just kind of as a joke in our regular podcast. But I honestly wasn't worried about anything that it implied, nor was I worried about how it implied Moraine. So that's really all I have to say about Lan. If you have thoughts about differences in Lan from the books, feel free to drop me a line at BustBlockbusters. You can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. That's MATTS audioblog@gmail.com. Or you can, just hit me up on the Discord server on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. Now, Moraine. Okay, let's talk about this. The lack of Angreol use. At least we saw her pack it at the beginning in the intro of episode 1. Beautiful little piece there that she was doing. And we also saw her little headpiece. She helped Egwene with focusing that, focusing a little bit of her power. So the only thing that I have about the Angreol really is I think it was used specifically to cure Tam in the first book. And then she has to use it sometimes when she's drawing as much one power as she can for herself. And you would think that it would need to be used when she basically broke that building apart and threw it at all of the Trollocs in Ebon's Field or Two Villages or whatever they're calling it. But maybe the way that the Angreol is being used in the show doesn't mean that she has to actually physically hold it in her hand and focus her power through it or draw power from it or whatever. Maybe it's just that as long as she has it on her person, it helps magnify her power. And it's probably what helped keep her alive longer, or at least not as hurt as long as she did until they got close to Shadar Logoth. Finally, the last character I want to talk about for these 3 episodes is Tom Merrilin. I already talked about how disgusted I am with people hating on the patch cloak. I mean, they're there. They're on the inside. There's no problem with that I have with that. I don't understand. I really enjoyed this portrayal of this character. I really enjoyed his scene with Matt when Matt had to admit to him that he was going to take that Aiel's jewel for money because he needed money. To say, we've all had desperate times, and to instantly forgive Matt for that because he recognizes probably that from experience himself. I love the fact that he's so good with knives. As we know, he likes to hide knives everywhere. We saw him drop one out of his sleeve when he first approached Matt. All of that stuff was fantastic. I have no issues with Tom Merrilin at all. Now, would he have a 6-string guitar? Yeah. Are you mad that Matt and Rand aren't becoming his apprentices and they're going to learn how to, make music and entertain for themselves? I mean, do we really need that? When you've got a guy singing that song so beautifully, do we need to hear Rand and Matt attempting that? Why would you even complain about that? I'm happy that they've kind of skipped that part. And unfortunately, maybe they won't. Maybe we'll see Rand and Matt learning how to play music and do kinds of flips and stuff from Tom when we get them on a boat, because that's where they're headed, right? For episode 4. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see how all that plays out. But if they don't, if they skip all of that stuff completely, I'm perfectly cool with it. It can be amended in anything that has to do with later on. It doesn't need to be there. It really doesn't. And maybe Joshua and Barney aren't the world's greatest singers either. So I'm totally cool with them totally dispensing with the music stuff if they want to. In fact, Tom doesn't, his credentials were laid out in that song right there. We never have to hear Tom sing again, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm sold. And I loved the introduction of Tom Merrilin, as I think I said on the non-book reader podcast. So I think that's all that I have for you right now. You'll be getting this. You probably will have already seen episode 4 by the time that this airs, if you're like me, because I live in the Central Time Zone, which means that if it drops midnight GMT, I'm getting it at 7 p.m. the night before. So I'll definitely have watched it, but I'm recording this on the night before Thanksgiving. Speaking of which, you probably are only getting this on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So survive Black Friday. That is your mission. And then show up at my Discord at 2 p.m. Central Time on Saturday and tell me what you thought of the episode that you watched Thursday night, like me, at Thanksgiving night. Because I'm not going to be doing the football. I'm going to be doing Wheel of Time. I hope that you all are enjoying the show. If you're not, let me know why. I'm perfectly open-eared to that. I just don't want to hear whining about things that I'm used to whining about. I'm the guy who whines about the fact that they shouldn't have been able to grow tomatoes on the island in Lost if they didn't have any seeds to begin with. I'm the guy that makes pointless little points about that. So you're not going to trick me by doing any of that stuff. You're not going to excite me by doing any of that stuff, except for me to say, stay out of my lane. That's my job. And I have none of that for this particular series so far. So far, I don't have a single tomato to throw at this show. And hopefully you don't either, but if you do, let me know. Tweet to @BustBlockbuster on Twitter. And you can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com, or you can leave comments in the YouTube presentations of these as well. I appreciate you joining me for this journey, and we will see you next time on Bustin' Blockbusters.